Hey everyone, I'm back for the final day of our free movement series. This is day 5, and this is where we're going to start to put everything together. So we've explored kind of 4 different tasks. We've looked at the float, slippery joints, inviting in thickness, tension, and we've also looked at isolation. So we're going to kind of look at bringing all of those together. And I think what we'll do is kind of starting with the float, as always, having that base, that starting ground. And then I'll kind of gently cue us to start to perhaps move into our second task, that slippery joints. And then maybe at some point inviting in that thickness and then playing in with the isolation. And then from there, after I've kind of guided us through all those stages, we can have a couple of minutes of just kind of chopping and changing through which task we want to work with today, okay? So you can chop and change as much as you want. You might want to dedicate a lot of time to just one task. If there's one that you particularly enjoyed working with, that's absolutely fine by me. And just have a little bit of fun with it. Again, as always, completely detached with what this might look like. If you want to film something, if you feel comfortable filming something and maybe sharing it, great, I'd love to see it. Do feel free to tag me on Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is. But even if you are filming, again, see if we can forget that the camera is there. Let's not try and think about performing for the camera in any way. You're not performing for me in any way. You're just kind of exploring movement, seeing how it feels to move in this way. All right? So here we go. Let's come back to our float. Let's place the feet down and towards the ground. Spread the toes into whatever kind of surface you are standing on, whether it's carpet, hardwood floors, maybe you're even lucky enough to be on a dance floor, studio floor right now. Okay, take a moment to drop into your body, the physical body. See how the body feels here and now. Perhaps we feel kind of full of this inspiration, full to the brim of all this potential for movement. And kind of the body is ready for us to give it permission to just let go and explore and see what happens along the way. So again, noticing how we feel, what we bring to this free movement practice. And just knowing that perhaps whatever we find along the way, whatever happens, again, it was meant to be. So let's take a deep breath in through the nose. And deep breath out through the mouth. Twice more, deep breath in. Deep breath out. One more, deep breath in. Deep breath out. Beautiful. From here, let's gently initiate that float. So suddenly the body starts to feel more spacious. The arms start to float away from the sides of the body. Our bones start to almost float away from one another. So can you imagine your upper arm bone, your humerus start to float away from that shoulder joint? Perhaps the ribs start to float away from one another. Sternum floats away from the center of the chest. And all of our internal organs, rather than being packed together, they suddenly have this room to breathe. We might start shifting the weight from side to side. And again, as you start to move, perhaps that little bit more around your space. If you still do have the eyes closed, just be mindful of where you are in the room. Lovely, well done. Floating through space. So remember, this is our base point. This is our kind of starting point. We can come back to this whenever we need to. So as we introduce the later tasks and the pace of our movement perhaps start to quicken and we feel the body tire and fatigue, we can have these moments when we return back to this float. And again, give our bodies the space to almost process all the information we are taking in, but also all the information we are then sending out. Lovely, well done. Continuing that slow, steady breath as you float. And again, remembering all these different places in the body that can experience that float. So maybe the head starts floating away from the very top of our spine. It's almost quite similar to isolation, the task we looked at yesterday. So it just shows how all of the tasks we have looked at can so easily be linked together. Beautiful. Okay. Let's take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Now perhaps holding on to this idea of floating for a few more moments, but every so often adding in this kind of slippery joint. So there's this moment where the body feels kind of super steady, super secure, and there's this moment where almost like a joint slips out of place, so the shoulder might kind of slip and it takes us down onto another level, but we come back to that float. So we're going to play with that for a few moments, starting to connect this idea of floating and this idea of slippery joints together. So as you float, and there's a moment where one joint kind of slips and it takes us into another place. And as best as we can, let's try not to preempt where this place in the body is that's going to have that slippery joint. It's so easy as we're moving quite slowly here to suddenly think, okay, where could I slip? And it's so easy to kind of think, oh, it's my knee. Yeah, let's try not to preempt it. Okay, let's come naturally. So floating, 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 there's that slippery joint. And maybe we start to add in slippery joints one after the other. So let's say, just an example, doesn't have to be like this. Let's say maybe the shoulder gets slippy and then the head goes as well, then the knee. So we start to connect slippery joints together, but we still kind of come back to that float. Let's stay with that just for a few moments. So mixing between floating and slippery joints. Beautiful. Okay. We might have moments where we feel the body is ready to kind of let go and just explore these slippery joints all over. And again, once we feel like our energy has kind of been spent for that one task, we come back to that float. So there's two kind of very different dynamics happening here. Okay. So again, you go at your own time. You decide when to float, when to have that slip and slide. Okay. Okay, let's go for another breath. Exhale. Deep breath in. Exhale. Okay. Come back to that base point, come back to that float. And throughout this, let's see if we can keep moving. So even if the arms start to get a little bit tired, even if we really want to have that break, let's keep that float going. So even if we need to move at a really slow pace here, we still keep moving. Okay. Let's take another breath in. And a breath out. Now starting to invite in this third task we looked at, and that is that thickness. So imagining the muscles wrapping around the bone, inviting in this tension. So again, it's very different to that super soft float, and all of a sudden there's tension, everything becomes perhaps a little bit more restricted, and then we can let it go. Float. Beautiful. And perhaps we don't let that tension go into a float. Perhaps it's actually, again, a slippery joint that brings us back into the float. So let's play with that a little bit. Floating, 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 floating. When you're ready to, invite that tension into somewhere in the body, wherever it may be, invite it in, gather in all that energy, and then let it go. Maybe it's that slippery joint, or maybe you just come into that float. Lovely, well done. And even if the body kind of really lets itself go here and we kind of fall off balance and we kind of lose our center, let it take you, okay? It's just going to naturally take you from one place to the next, and we trust that the body is going to catch itself. Okay, let's work with that for a few times. Floating. Invite that tension in wherever it may be, toes, ankles, shins, chest, and let it go. Lovely, well done. Okay, now let's go a couple of times, kind of speeding up a little bit. So rather than spending too much time in our float, let's kind of chop and change that a little bit more quickly. So floating, tension, 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 slippery joints, tension, 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 slippery joints. Lovely, well done. Float for a while. Okay, this is where you can start, again, going of your own accord. Don't feel as though you have to follow me. Okay. Lovely, well done. Beautiful. Take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Beautiful. Come back to your float. Dial the pace down. Okay. Now we've brought back all three tasks so far. The float, the slippery joint, the tension. We're now going to bring back the isolation. We've already, even through this little bit of movement, we're already starting to isolate through the body. So it's already happening. We just need to kind of emphasize it that little bit more. So as we're floating, maybe just one body part now starts to float. Maybe it's just the one. Maybe it's just that one body part that starts to have the tension. And maybe it's just that one body part that has the slippery joint and we take it across into another body part, floating. We can repeat the exact same pattern again, or maybe we start slippery joint into tension. Lovely. Feel free to use the breath. I always use the breath to help kind of aid whatever movement it is I'm going through. And especially when you're inviting in that tension, there's so much temptation to hold the breath because you're drawing everything in, muscles wrapping around the bone. It's almost like we're being wrapped in cling film, like that fascia is getting so tight around our muscles that everything feels suddenly so restrained, almost like we can't breathe, but then we let it go. Yeah? Okay. So we have all four now in. We have float, we have slippery joints, we have tension, we have isolation. Now for a few more minutes, explore however you want. So you might have a pattern. You might go float, slippery joint, tension, float. You might go float, isolate, tension, slippery joint. You might follow a set pattern between all the different tasks we've explored. Or you might just go free for all and let whatever happens in the moment just happen. So again, rather than kind of preempting what tasks we're going to choose, just seeing how the body wants to move. Okay, so about 2 minutes. Again, these are kind of short videos, so I try not to make them too long. 2 minutes. If you want to put music on, feel free to do so if that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. But again, just be aware how the music might be influencing your movement. We really want to focus on the tasks at hand as best as we can. So here we go. 2 minutes. Whatever you want to do, whatever happens in the moment, if it helps to close the eyes, feel free to do so. Okay. Lovely, well done. As always, be careful of space. Be mindful of what's around you. Don't be afraid to explore different levels. If you've got the space for it, feel free to explore. Lovely, well done. Already a minute has gone. So keep going, keep exploring. If you find the body getting tired, dial down the intensity, maybe come back to a float. But it's just 1 minute. How much can we explore in that 1 minute? Beautiful. Take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. One more. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Starting to minimize your movement. Planting the feet firmly underneath you. Spread the toes down into the ground. Let the body soften. Notice how you feel. Notice this perhaps almost buzzing sensation as all this information is channeling around our body, almost like this static electricity pulsating through our body. Lighting up avenues, pathways we perhaps hadn't anticipated before. Take a moment to kind of drink in all of that knowledge, absorb it as best as we can. And then take a breath. And exhale. Lovely. You can gently open the eyes when you're ready. Take in your surroundings, take in your space, making sure again we have firmly kind of brought ourselves back to where we are now, and have a moment to check in, see how you feel. If you did film a little something, have a little watch back, but again, no judgment. So rather than thinking this looks pretty, this looks beautiful, this looks interesting, it's all interesting. Everything you've just done is interesting, okay? So try not to perhaps judge yourselves too harshly, really try and kind of perhaps bring down that need to kind of, I don't know, perhaps need to prove yourself to anyone. Okay, what you've just done, I say, is interesting, it's amazing, and I hope you enjoyed it. So this was a 5 days little mini series for you. If you'd like me to do more of them, let me know. If you'd like to have one perhaps in a different style, maybe exploring something other, like, I don't know, it could be something completely different, 5-day meditation maybe. Yeah, let me know. I'm always kind of looking to see what you guys want to explore, and we can explore it together. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed this 5-day exploration, and I hope to see you again soon, be it on the mat or off the mat. All right, see you then. Bye.